Good afternoon. 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 Well, hello, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host today, Shantae Charles, and it is the continuation of Black History Month. It took me a moment to get in here because my camera kept wanting to go sideways, so we fixed it, and now I'm here. I'm going to sing one of my favorite songs to you for this Black History Month, and that is the song by the incomparable Sam Cooke. Here we go. I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been a long time coming, and I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. I go to the movie and I go downtown, and somebody keep telling me, don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. There's been times that I thought I couldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Yes, it will. And if you notice, I didn't sing all of those lyrics because we would have been here for a little bit longer. But that's one of my favorite songs because it speaks to Black people's longing to be free, Black people's desire, and also to our hope that change is going to come. It doesn't matter how much people try to delay change. It doesn't matter how much people try to push back on change. The reality is change is coming, it's going to come, and it's here. And speaking of that, one of my favorite people that I like to be inspired by, to study, to listen to her speeches, listen to her words, is Fannie Lou Hamer. And this is the art piece that I created to honor Fannie Lou. You see the Mississippi, part of the Mississippi flag in the background, the magnolia here, the M for Mississippi. Um, and I want to dedicate this, I want to donate this piece either to a well known Mississippian or to a Mississippi museum. It is a It's an acrylic piece on canvas. It's a flat board, so it's not something that is difficult to carry or to send. So if you know a well-known Mississippian or a Mississippi museum that would like a piece that I created in honor of Fannie Lou Hamer, please message me, hit me up. Um, my art email is thedaringdialogues@gmail.com, because I would love to send this piece into Mississippi to encourage a Mississippian to keep fighting for justice. All right? No strings attached. I'm just trying to donate a piece of art. All right? Now, let's get into our readings for today. We have been reading from two different books. This book is Reparations, A Christian Call for Repentance and Repair. And recently, some Christians around the world have started Lent. Some Christians practice that. It's a 40-day journey where you are supposed to be praying and you are supposed to be thinking about and honoring the poor. And you're also supposed to be doing something in terms of giving things up. And I made the suggestion today and I said, hey, if you are a white person practicing Lent, maybe consider, going all out this Lent and doing things like giving up property, giving up stocks, donating to Black and Indigenous grassroots organizations. And when I said it, the person almost choked. And I was like, what's the problem? I thought you were celebrating Lent. I'm just saying, if you're gonna practice it, go all out this season, because we do need it. With all of the things being erased and stripped and defunded, that would be a great way to practice what it is that you're preaching, right? Right? That's what I thought. So we're getting into reparations today. And then the second book we're looking at is The Spirit of Justice, True Stories of Faith, Race, and Resistance. And so, let's see. I want to start with this book and see where Jamar Tisby is taking us today. This is the chapter entitled The Language of Liberty. So in case you're new here, we spent about 25 minutes reading. And then the second half of our show, we have discussion. All right. So those of you who are with us for the first time, hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. The section that we're reading today is entitled Prince Hall Appeals to the Mild Religion of Jesus. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about Prince Hall, and then he's going to move into talking to us about the Methodist Anti-Slavery Tradition. We'll look at those two sections from his book, and then we will move over to the book on reparations. Let's listen in. Most of what we know about Prince Hall's early life remains very vague. He was born in either 1735 or 1738, likely in New England, but perhaps in Barbados. Historians know he was enslaved at an early age by William Hall of Boston, a leather worker who trained young Prince in the trade. Eventually, he was freed and became one of the most prominent Black leaders of the Revolutionary period. Prince Hall is best known for forming the first Black Freemason Lodge in North America, right around the time that some Africans were forming their own Black churches and denominations. The African Grand Lodge No. 1 was perhaps the first secular Black institution formed to advance the cause of Black emancipation and equality. Hall advocated for emancipation and a return to Africa. He was also instrumental in securing one of the earliest and only cases of reparations for a formerly enslaved person, Belinda Royale / Sutton. Hall likely wrote the petition that successfully procured for Belinda an annual pension of £15 and 12 shillings for her servitude. While Hall is most often remembered for his political activism and his role in founding the Black Freemasons, what is less known but no less significant is how he incorporated the Christian religion into his efforts to advance Black rights. In 1772, Hall became a member of a congregational church, frequently drawing on his religious beliefs in his public work on behalf of Black people. He started a school for Black children in his own home and advocated to release free Black people who had been kidnapped into slavery. Hall was doing quite a bit of work besides the institutional organization. In 1777, Hall co-authored a well-known petition to the Massachusetts General Assembly asking for emancipation. In it, he wrote that, quote, a great number of Blacks in a, quote, free and Christian country, unquote, understood that, quote, they have in common with all other men a natural and unalienable right to freedom. In this section of the petition, Hall echoed the natural rights arguments and language of the Declaration of Independence, but he rooted his call for freedom in the existential equality of all humankind as granted by God, whom he called the great parent of the universe. Hall went on to argue that God had equally bestowed freedom on all people. He appealed to the moral sensibility of white people as fellow Christians as he wrote, quote, a people professing the mild religion of Jesus need not be informed that a life of slavery is far worse than non-existence. In 1783, Prince Hall is believed to have penned one of the first and only successful appeals for reparations on behalf of an enslaved person. He wrote for Belinda Sutton, or Royale, who, according to the appeal sent to the Massachusetts General Court, had been kidnapped from Africa and labored as an enslaved person for 50 years. After her slaveholder, a British loyalist, fled his lands during the Revolutionary War, Belinda, whose face was marked with the furrows of time and was now elderly and caring for an infirm daughter, demanded an annual pension of 15 pounds and 12 shillings. One part of the argument was economic. Belinda had labored for decades at the behest of her slaveholder and had helped to enrich him, yet she was never compensated for her labors. Despite these years of bondage, she was denied the enjoyment of one morsel of that immense wealth, a part whereof had been accumulated by her own industry, and the whole augmented by her servitude. In her plea, she sought only that the just return of honest industry be hers. Another part of the appeal was religious. Prince Hall, writing on behalf of Belinda, claimed the divine right of liberty to which all people were entitled. He wrote of the preservation of that freedom which the Almighty Father intended for all of the human race. As the winds of Revolutionary War still swirled with cries of liberty, a humble and an elderly enslaved woman joined her voice to the chorus. Hall was her ally in demanding reparations for a life spent in bondage, and he pointed to the Almighty in the heavens for justification. Prince Hall wrote appeals to legislative bodies and helped build Black institutions to advance the cause of Black people in the fledgling United States. Along with many other Black Christians, he saw in his religion the foundation to call for freedom because God had created all people as equals, each one with the universal right to self-determination. Hall deftly drew on Enlightenment and revolutionary principles of independence, as well as Christian claims to the inherent dignity of all people as creations of the Most High God. He essentially used the language of the Constitution and used the language of the Christian faith in order to win this woman her reparations. This was going to be problematic in early America, which is why you had to have things like, what was it? The Great Awakening. Because if more people began to do this, if more people began to latch on to the legal aspect and the moral aspect of freedom, you were going to see more cases like this. So what happens? The Great Awakening, or what I like to call the Great Re-Sleeping. because in those movements, they essentially came up with a new doctrine to say that Black people could be saved, but only their souls could be saved. Their bodies, however, were still property and could still belong to Christians in enslavement. So they had to come up with more doctrine, new doctrine, to refute these kinds of lawsuits that were sure to follow. Okay? So let's be clear. The Great Awakening was about putting white people's consciousness back to sleep. And we see a little bit of that happening even today. All right, let's look at the next part here. The Methodist Anti-Slavery Tradition. History demonstrates that there would be no Black church if racism had not been present in the white church. The formation of the African Methodist Episcopal Church was initiated by a racist incident at St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church in Philadelphia in 1787. Here's what happened. Now, I will push back on this narrative because there were other Black or African Christians before what was happening in America. So we could say there would be no Black church in America if racism had not been present at the white church. So let's talk about what happened. There was a racist incident at St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church in Philadelphia in 1787 when white church officials attempted to pull Black worshipers off their knees and into a segregated section during a prayer. So this is for all of the why do we have Black churches head people and why do we have white churches head people? Make sure you bring them back to Philadelphia, 1787. White church officials attempted to pull Black worshipers off their knees into a segregated section during a prayer, not after and not before, while they were praying. The notorious departure of Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, and their fellow Black compatriots due to racism is even more repulsive, given Methodism's original anti-slavery commitments. As far back as 1743, John Wesley, one of the founders of Methodism in England, came out forcefully against slavery. In a document called General Rules, he outlined the behaviors that he believed characterized a life of holiness. And here the writer has given us this picture of John Wesley. He wrote, "It is therefore expected of all who continue therein that they should continue to evidence their desire of salvation, first, by doing no harm," which is actually one of my life principles. First, do no harm. By avoiding evil of every kind, especially that which is most generally practiced as slaveholding, buying or selling enslaved persons. In his brief line, Wesley upheld the spirit of justice and called out the slave trade as a moral evil to be avoided by Christians, not to be partaken in, not to create new doctrines to justify while you were holding your fellow brethren and your fellow human beings as property. But he called it out as a moral evil. In so doing, he positioned the growing movement of Methodism in opposition to the enslavement of Black people in the United States. Years later, Black minister Richard Allen refused to become a pastor of an Episcopal church on the grounds that his future was with the Methodist movement. No religious sect or denomination would suit the capacity of colored people as well as the Methodist. Methodism's anti-slavery sentiments were reaffirmed in the official actions of a meeting held in 1780. At the annual conference that year, ministers approved a document that asked, ought this conference to require those traveling preachers who hold enslaved persons to give promises to set them free? The answer was yes. Another question asked, does this conference acknowledge that slavery is contrary to the laws of God, man, and nature, and hurtful to society? The answer was yes. Then in 1784 at the Christmas Conference, where the Methodist denomination in the United States was officially formed, Methodist ministers formally condemned slavery, declaring it contrary to the golden law of God on which hang all the law and the prophets, and the inalienable rights of mankind, as well as every principle of the revolution. The golden law of God refers to Jesus' response when someone asked about the greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22, verses 37 through 39. As concerned as they were with personal piety, many Methodists also kept up with politics. In arguing against slavery, they echoed the language of inalienable rights from the Declaration of Independence. They also pointed to every principle of the Revolution to show that slavery violated the spirit of liberty and equality that suffused the rhetoric of the American War for Independence. Again, in 1796, the General Conference meeting of Methodists reaffirmed the denomination's anti-slavery position. We declare that we are more than ever convinced of the great evil of the African slavery which still exists in these United States. The ministers insisted that slaveholders could not hold official positions in the denomination, that no one could become a member until they had been spoken to freely and faithfully on the topic of slavery, and that anyone who had sold a slave was barred from membership in the Methodist Church. If you want to know why so many Black people might be AME. However, while a truth can be forcefully stated, rules must be enforced. Few ministers were willing to oppose the wealthiest members of their congregations over the issue of slave trading or slave holding. The Methodist documents themselves often came with the caveat that the state laws should be respected. This internal tension eventually led to a regional split in the Methodist denominations between Northern anti-slavery and Southern pro-slavery members in the buildup to the Civil War. So, has there always been this issue of people doing something different in practice than what they do on paper? Absolutely. All right, let's go back into reparations, and we're going to read the next section entitled from the chapter Seeing the Reality of White Supremacy. We're going to look at the section Supremacy is Social Function and White Supremacy as Original, and we'll stop there. Supremacy is social function. The creation of hierarchical racial categories for human beings was an anthropological revolution of the Enlightenment era. It created a new epistemology of human difference, a model of knowing that brought into existence new ways of being human. But not surprisingly, the real impact of this development, the true expression of its power, lies in its social and political expression. Modern racial categories were framed in the context of enormous social transformations, the renaissance of the sciences, the rise of colonial powers, the expansion of global markets, the flowering of humanistic ideals. Emerging in this context, racial categories were never merely a form of anthropological classification. They always entailed and were in service to social and political functions. The social function of whiteness was to secure for whites the dominant role in the hierarchy of the emerging world and an exclusive claim to its incalculable benefits. The social function of whiteness was, in a word, supremacy. Understanding the social and political supremacy of whiteness in America is critical, not only for understanding the nature of American racism, but also for beginning the work of meaningfully engaging it. To that end, in what follows, we seek to show that the social supremacy of whiteness was original to the founding of America, pervasive across its institutions, and enduring throughout its history. Now, if you have grown up Black in America, you already know this because you've lived it. But let's take a look at what the writer is saying on this first part about supremacy as being original to the founding of America. And while I get that part ready, I want to point out, let me see if I can find it. Let's see, racial categories in enlightenment. Yeah. During the 18th century Enlightenment, European intellectuals developed pseudoscientific racial categories to classify humanity, creating hierarchies that positioned white Europeans as superior. Thinkers like Carolus Linnaeus and Johann Friedrich Blumenbach formalized these divisions, often to justify colonialism, slavery, and the exploitation of non-European peoples. And so you have Blumenbach's The Five Races, where he divided people up into Caucasian, Mongolian, Malayan, Ethiopian, and American. And I believe I can find some of these original drawings that people were using to do this. So I want people to see. They had visuals. It wasn't just like, so here's one, because I want to make sure people have some visuals to go along with what we're talking about today. All right, there's one. You know, the American man, the Mongolian, the red man, the native, the Indian, the American, and the Ethiopian or the African. All right. So these were posters that they were using and drawings that they were using to supposedly talk about the humanity of white people as being superior, okay, and then everyone else being less superior. Notice they have like the Mongolian man closer to the white person, but notice this little small head down here, okay? So it was propaganda. And I want people to see this. You know, where does this come from when you have a sitting president putting the faces of apes on the face of a former president and first lady? Where do these notions of race science come from? This is the stuff that these people have believed for a very long time. They're just bringing it back to the forefront. Okay, I'm trying to make sure you guys can see that. They're bringing these notions back to the forefront. They haven't gone anywhere. They're just bringing them back up. Let me show you a couple more. So these are some of the drawings that were going around in that time. Phrenologists, people trying to distinguish people by their physical features, to try to say that some people were more superior than others based on their facial features, based on the amount of melanin in their skin. Here's the one that's referred to, and this went around from 1752 to 1840. So you're talking about almost close to 100 years. Okay, this is Blumenbach's Five Human Races. That's what they were pushing. Now let's read about it. As in all nations, the origin story of America is, culturally speaking, sacred. It serves as the basis of national identity, the justification for national behavior, and the touchstone for national aspirations. Americans teach this story in schools, celebrate it in parades, summon it in speeches, exhibit it in museums, pin it on lapels, and pledge allegiance to it hand over heart. To suggest that white supremacy is original to that story is at best complicated. This challenge is all the more exaggerated in our cultural moment in which competing accounts of American origins are deployed as weapons in a profoundly divisive cultural and political contest. There are those whose account of American origins is almost exclusively a tale of throwing off the bonds of royal oppression and founding a new nation of liberty and justice for all. In this rendering, America is understood only in heroic terms, a lone defender of freedom in a world of widespread political bondage. Anything that might shadow that heroism is wholly obscured from the view. There are others whose account of American origins is exclusively a tale of white supremacy and bondage, an economic and political tragedy in which the unfathomable suffering of some enabled the unimaginable enrichment of others. In this rendering, America is understood wholly in terms of villainy, as a singular example of the racialized horrors of bondage, extraction, and violence. Anything that might complicate this account is often viewed with dismissive suspicion. For a great many Americans, the conflict between these two zero-sum accounts is a source of personal stress and political agitation. Each side frames its claims not simply in historical, but in moral terms. Each views the other exclusively as the enemy and accepts nothing less than absolute allegiance. It is not our intention or desire to participate in this conflict or to have the view of American origins weaponized in the service of culture wars. We are not seeking to offer a comprehensive theory of America or to imbue the origins with a single meaning. Our claim about American origins is much more modest. Simply put, the social supremacy of people characterized as white, in other words, white supremacy, was present and powerful in the founding of America. The most obvious expression of this is the decision to maintain and protect institutions of slavery. This institution existed as part of the old colonial world for nearly 3 centuries before the formal founding of America. But crucially, even the American founders who were casting off much of the old world, casting off institutions that were as ancient and powerful as the monarchy itself, chose, let's make that clear, they chose to bring slavery into the New World with them. This language of choice is critical. The enslavement of human beings in the United States of America did not just happen. It was embraced and sustained through a series of choices made by other human beings, the founding fathers of a new nation, bringing an old world process like slavery into a new one. It is true that this choice was contested at the time, even by those who made it. It was broadly understood that the American choice to perpetuate the enslavement of human beings directly contradicted America's legitimating ideals. This was obviously the opinion among Black Americans who before, during, and after the Revolution struggled for freedom from white supremacy. In South Carolina, for example, white crowds marched through the streets protesting the 1765 Stamp Act with cries of liberty, and their African American slaves took up the chant in their own right, creating panic among slaveholding communities there. Likewise, Northern African Americans, such as Philadelphians Richard Allen and James Forten, seeing the emancipatory logic of America's revolutionary ideals, worked to establish those ideas in hopes of making their people free. As we just read in this book, because if you're telling the whole American story, guess what? It's going to be a through line no matter what book you pick up. Other African Americans joined the British Army, seeing the defeat of the American Revolution as their only hope for freedom. To make the point, many of these marched into war with a patch on the shoulder of their uniform that read, "Liberty to Slaves." Now, let's see if we can find some evidence of that. Find me the American Revolutionary patch, "Liberty to Slaves." Mm. This is on view at the Schenectady Museum. This is a museum of the American Revolution. They'll probably take this out of the museum after they figure out what it means. But there's a part of an American Revolution soldier's garment, and it literally says liberty. Yeah, it's hanging in a museum in Schenectady as proof that those who were going to war for Black Americans had liberty to slaves as a patch on the shoulder of their uniform. Still others, despairing of any freedom under the rule of either the Americans or the British, sought to take their liberty into their own hands through a series of largely ill-fated resurrections or insurrections. This criticism of white supremacy and its embodiment, slavery, was not limited to Black Americans. Criticism came also from white Americans, even those at the very center of the founding. In the years of tension that preceded the revolution, as democratic ideals began to coalesce more broadly in the popular mind, the colonies saw the emergence of an unprecedented number of anti-slavery writings. And in the wake of the publication of the Declaration of Independence and the inauguration of the War for Independence, a number of American slaveholders, Virginian James Madison among them, began the process of voluntary, if limited, manumission. Manumission being the release of the enslaved. In the minds of not a few Americans, the logic was fairly straightforward. The conviction that God had endowed human beings with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was fundamentally at odds with the dehumanization, the misery, the bondage, and death intrinsic to the slave system. A letter written by Abigail Adams to her husband and future President John Adams is illustrative of this sentiment. She writes, "It always seemed a most iniquitous scheme to me to fight ourselves for what we are daily robbing and plundering from those who have as good a right to freedom as we have." Why, thank you, Abigail Adams. Even so, such sentiments, though powerful in the imagination, were not to prevail in the actual institutions of the new nation. America enslaved human beings even as choruses of liberty were sung in its streets. And not only was slavery to continue in the new republic, it was to be politically privileged. At the Constitutional Convention in 1787, the Three-Fifths Compromise, which determined state population and thus political representation by counting not only free citizens, but also 3/5 of an enslaved person, guaranteed the political dominance of the slaveholding South for generations to come, still affecting us to this day. America was left to bear the contradiction between its animating ideal of liberty and justice for all and its actual practice of liberty and justice for a few, with bondage and injustice for many. Emblematic of this contradiction is Thomas Jefferson himself. Jefferson, the poet laureate of the revolutionary republicanism, was also Jefferson, the trafficker of human beings. Neither he nor the nation he founded was ever able to escape this contradiction. And through the 13th Amendment, the contradiction yet continues. The inescapable implication is that from the moment of its founding, the United States of America was a willing participant in the legal kidnapping, torture, sale, bondage, and unaliving of thousands, and in time, millions of human beings. It willingly justified these things on the contrived racial grounds of Blackness. And the fruit of this decision has indelibly marked our fields, our cities, our churches, our banks, our bodies, and our shame. Any version of American origins that attempts to conceal this reality behind the thrill of revolutionary ideals or the elegance of colonial gardens is a lie. In light of these things, it is essential that when we tell the story of American origins, we tell the truth about the presence and power of white supremacy within it. This means to embrace not merely the fact of its existence, but also that this existence was not marginal. It was not on the fringes. It was central, not an inevitability, but it was a choice. And that this choice unalterably marked what America was, what America would become, and what America still is. We're going to stop there for today. All right. As I said, get this book. It's probably one of the most honest readings you're going to hear on reparations from people who are not Black, but who are in fact Christians. All right. Time to chop it up. Pastor Ben, we've got about 20, 25 minutes here to chop it up. So I'm going to bring you in now. And while we're waiting for our guests to join us, I'm going to bring my painting back one more time. This painting is 11 by 14. It is acrylic on canvas. This is Fannie Lou Hamer. It's a tribute to Fannie Lou Hamer and Mississippi. Again, I want to donate it to either a well-known Mississippian or a Mississippi museum. So if you are interested or you know of a museum that would love to receive this donation, please reach out thedaringdialogues@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good, and how are you doing?
I'm good.
I'm good.
I can't see you,
I
but I
can't
can
see
hear
you,
you.
but I can hear you.
Okay, I can see and hear you this time.
Oh, I
Oh,
see
I
you
see
now.
you now.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
hmm.
Where is this
Where is this
hall?
hall?
Where is what hall?
The attorney.
Oh, Prince Hall?
Yeah, he must have died.
You know, I would love to see. Well, in today's time, he would have been a civil rights attorney, right? He would be a civil rights, human rights attorney.
Hmm.
I would love to see more civil rights attorneys begin to file lawsuits in this regard to the repair of Americans. I think there's enough evidence, there's enough studies. Um, I don't necessarily know that they should file them under this administration, right?
Hmm.
But I think they should be preparing the cases to file. Because at this point, I don't think we're going to get what we need without filing. I think for decades, we've been kindly saying we deserve reparations. I think for decades, we've been saying, please do the right thing and provide reparations. I think at this point
Hmm.
in the human and American story, lawsuits just need to be filed. And I've been saying this. Um, I shared some years back about the dream I had that a group of lawyers got together and they sued the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, on behalf of Black people with the evidence to say that because of what the FCC has allowed over the years with film, with television, with commercials, that the FCC has played a part in how Black people have been viewed in this country, to the point that it has caused grave physical, tangible harm to Black Americans. Like, there is enough evidence around that shows, data
Mm-hmm.
wise and research wise, that the images and the way that Black Americans have been portrayed through communications has contributed to the harm done to us. Like, that was my dream. Like, that was the dream I had, that all these attorneys got together and they filed a lawsuit against the FCC. And considering all the stuff the FCC is coming out and doing now, it's all the more reason why a lawsuit should be filed. So,
Mm-hmm.
in the dream, they filed this major lawsuit and they won in the dream. And they won billions of dollars on behalf of Black Americans. And the money was put into a trust. And that money in the trust was then distributed to Black Americans and the descendants of the formerly enslaved. That was actually how we got major reparations in this country. And I had a dream about it. Now, I have shared this with attorneys. They haven't moved on it. But I'm putting it out here again because I believe in the future, some intelligent attorneys are going to get together and they're going to file this suit against the FCC, and they're going to win. And I hope that when they win, they will play this video back and
Mm-hmm.
they will remember that Black woman who had a dream that this was possible. Because again, I don't dream anyway. I don't dream and remember my dreams unless it comes to pass. So I may not see it in my lifetime. I may not see this happen and come to pass. But I believe there will be a group of attorneys that rise up, that join forces, that sue the FCC on behalf of Black America and get reparative damages in money so huge that it becomes a history making case, and that money gets put into a trust for future generations of Black people to begin to repair the harm that has been done. Maybe we can't repair all of the harm, right? But we can start somewhere. And one of the places we can start is the harm that has been done to our image through
Mm-hmm.
communications, through television, through radio, through movies, the things that they've allowed to be posted and published through media. This would include newspapers that played a part in posting false information about people who were then lynched because of what the newspapers published and put out there. Um, so I believe that it will I believe that it will happen. I believe that.
Well,
But tell
me,
me,
knowing
what did you
you,
think about those classifications that I put up today?
About the what
what
now?
now? The
Classifications?
classifications?
Yep, the visuals that were put up.
Oh, yeah, well,
Well,
listen, I
listen, I
already knew
already
about
knew
those
about those
things,
things,
and I've been
and I've
telling
been
people
telling people
about them.
about them.
I mean,
I
those
mean,
are the
those are
good
the good
ones.
ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those
Yeah,
are the
those
good
are the
ones
good ones
that you put
that you
up.
put up.
There's some
There's
that's a
some that's a
lot
lot
worth, like
worth, like
drawings with
drawings
black
with
folks
black
with
folks with
small heads
small
and
heads
lips
and lips
bigger than their
bigger than their
heads
heads,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like
stuff
that.
like that.
So
So
uh,
uh,
those were the
those
good
were the
ones.
good ones.
They were
They were
bad,
bad,
but those were the
but those
good
were the
ones.
good ones.
So
So
and see,
and
this
see,
is their
this is their
theory,
theory,
and this is
and
what
this is
people
what
don't
people
get.
don't get.
This is their
This is their
warped
warped
minds
minds
theory.
theory.
They had
They had
nothing to
nothing
base
to
it
base it
on
on
other than their
other than their
thoughts.
thoughts.
That was
That
it.
was it.
But they put
But
it
they
out
put
there
it
like
out there
it was
like it was
factual.
factual.
But
But
scientists
scientists
are learning the
are learning
complete
the complete
opposite.
opposite.
See, but nobody's listening
Nobody's
to the
listening to the
scientists now.
scientists now.
They
They
literally
literally
told them that
told them that
Jesus was
Jesus
black.
was black.
They literally
They
told
literally
them that,
told
oh,
them that,
wasn't
oh,
no
wasn't
white
no
people
white
back
people
then.
back
They
then.
couldn't
They
have
couldn't have
survived.
survived.
But they want to
They want
ignore
to
that.
ignore that.
See, all these
All
things
these
that
things that
scientists are
scientists are
finding now,
finding now,
they want to
they want to
ignore it.
ignore it.
And they want to
And they want
stick
to
to their
stick to their
narratives,
narratives,
Hmm.
their
their
propaganda.
propaganda.
Now I want to
They
show
don't
you
They
like
don't
something.
like
facts.
facts.
I want to show you something that was just pulled up. Now remember, we just showed you all the the Liberty flag that's on view in the Schenectady Museum, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
began to talk about how some of the people who were fighting in these wars wore a frock that said "Liberty to Slaves." Now
Mm-hmm.
here is a recreation of the frock that was made in the 80s, and it is at the American Revolution Museum. Okay? So this was a recreation of what the frock might have looked like. But I want to tell you that the people at the Virginia Museum have gone in and adjusted what they're saying about this frock. Because now they're saying this object made in the 80s is a reproduction of a type of uniform allegedly worn by black loyalist soldiers in Lord Dunmore's Ethiopian regiment during the early days of the American Revolution. Because, yes, Ethiopians were brought over here. Almost every secondary account published includes a line or more about the frock. Now they're saying, however, there is little historical evidence that this frock ever existed, much less was donned by the whole of the regiment. So now they're going back in, right? And they're saying, in numerous accounts of black prisoners of war and colonial records include detailed descriptions of their state of dress when captured. None of them mention a garment with liberty to slaves inscribed upon it. So they're now trying to go back and say, "Oh, this is not necessarily true," because they don't want to admit it. But this is what we mean by erasing history, going back and trying to
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
rewrite history. And they're doing this in museums all over the country, by the way. It's not just
Yes.
it's
Yes.
not just the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. They're doing this all over the country, saying, "Oh, maybe this happened, maybe it didn't. Maybe it was a figment of people's imagination."
Well, here's
Here's
what
what
we
we
do
do
know.
know.
We do
We
know that
know that
they
they
brought
brought
our
our
ancestors
ancestors
over
over
here
here
and
and
enslaved
enslaved
them,
them,
got
got
wealthy
wealthy
off
off
free
free
labor,
labor,
promised us
promised us
40
40
acres
acres
and a
and a
mule,
mule,
which we
which we
never
never
received.
received.
Those are
Those are
factual.
factual.
We
We
all
all
know
know
that.
that.
And we're
And we're
still
still
waiting on
waiting
our
on our
40
40
acres on a
acres on a
mule.
mule.
They
They
gave
gave
Japanese
Japanese
reparations. They're
reparations. They're
paying
paying
Japanese
Japanese
reparations
reparations
for putting them
for
in,
putting
in,
them
in
in
prison
prison
camps.
camps.
We're
We're
paying
paying
Jews
Jews
because of the
because of the
Holocaust.
Holocaust.
We're paying
We're
them
paying them
reparations
reparations
because
because
Hitler
Hitler
used
used the
how do I say,
how
the
do I say, the
system of
system of
racism that
racism that
America
America
created.
created.
Mhm.
Uh,
Uh,
so they're
so
paying
they're paying
them,
them,
but you
but
won't
you
pay
won't
the
pay the
people that you
people that you
butchered, you
butchered, you
slaughtered, you
slaughtered, you
raped, you
raped, you
maimed, you
maimed, you
dismembered,
dismembered,
uh,
uh,
you
you
lynched them,
lynched them,
and they
and
built
they
this
built this
country, and you got
country, and you
wealthy
got
off
wealthy
of it.
off of it.
Could it be
Could it be
because we're
because we're
actually
actually
superior,
superior
and you want to
and
try
you
to
want to try
hold
to
us
hold us
down as
down
much
as
as
much as
possible?
possible?
You know, if we
If we
get some
get
money
some money
because we
because
can
we
make it
can make it
without
without
the
the
money,
money,
if y'all
if
leave
y'all
us
leave us
alone and stop
alone and stop
burning down
burning
and
down and
destroying our
destroying our
towns that we
towns that we
build out of
build out of
nothing
nothing
that are
that are
superior to
superior
your
to your
towns,
towns,
could that be
could that
it?
be it?
Or is that
Or is
just
that
part
just
of it?
part of it?
who are questioning what you're saying, the United States provides funding to support Holocaust survivors, primarily through grants for services like home care. Where is the Black home care grants for Black American elders? Grants for services like home care, food, and medicine rather than direct broad reparations payments. These funds are designed to assist elderly survivors, many of whom live in poverty, addressing the long term devastating impact of Nazi persecution. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has awarded grants, 12 million announced in 2015, to organizations like the Jewish Federations of North America for direct care services. A significant portion of this funding is aimed at roughly 25% of Holocaust survivors in the U.S. who live below the poverty line. The U.S. has actively helped survivors reclaim their assets, such as stolen property, bank accounts, and insurance policies from European institutions. So ask yourself, with all of the stuff that has happened with American enslavement, where are the grants being issued to the descendants of American enslaved persons? That would be your grandparents. That would be our great grandparents. That would be some of your parents. Where are the grants being given for home care for our elderly, for food, for medicine? So even if you don't want to give cash, where are the home care, food, and medical payments being given to the descendants of American enslavement? Because if you can do this for the Jews through the Jewish Federations of North America, if you can do it for them through that organization, why can't you give grants to the NAACP? Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why can't you give great grants to the United Congress for African Unity? Huh? Okay. Why can't you give grants to the United Negro College Fund? Hmm? Okay. In other words, there is no excuse for the dereliction of duty to provide for the survivors of the American persecution and the American enslavement program, for the peculiar institution of enslavement. There's no excuse. None. Mhm.
Screen freezing.
Of course, my screen is freezing because they don't want to hear that. They don't want to
I
hear
got a
that.
feeling they don't like us very much.
It's glitching. It's glitching because, oh my goodness, you're not supposed to be saying that. And for those who don't know, based on current IRS guidance for tax filing purposes, IRS provides tax relief exemptions and specialized treatments for specific circumstances related to Israel, to Holocaust survivors, and to clergy. Mhm. Affected individuals and businesses in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza have until September 30th, 2026 to file various federal returns and make tax payments. Restitution payments made to victims of Nazi persecution and their heirs. Listen to me, people. And their heirs
Mm-hmm.
are excluded from gross income. These payments do not need to be reported as taxable income on federal tax returns. Under the U.S. Israel Income Tax Treaty, contributions to Israeli charitable organizations may be tax deductible. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Income exemptions, certain residents of Israel performing personal services in the U.S., as independent contractors for employees may be exempt from U.S. income tax if they are in the U.S. for 182 days or less and meet specific criteria. Pension exemption. Article 21 of the U.S. Israel Tax Treaty generally exempts Social Security payments and certain public pensions paid by one country to a resident of the other. So I don't want to hear it about what you cannot do for black people in this country. I don't want to hear it.
Mm-mm.
See, we're not supposed to know what the laws say. We're not supposed to look into the tax code. We're not supposed to look into the policies. We're just supposed to say, well, they say they don't have the money for it, so I guess that's what it is. No. Just like slavery was a choice, like the writer said, just like it was a choice to bring that old world um, profession, that old world trafficking system into the new world, that was a choice. Reparations needs to be a choice too.
Mm-hmm.
But we know y'all are going to choose to do right. So now it needs to become law.
Mm-hmm.
Laws are written when people don't want to choose to do right.
Mm-hmm.
Final thoughts.
Well, I'm gonna go with just ended. Laws are written when people choose not to do right. We just happen to have an administration that laws don't matter to.
Mm-hmm.
So to get reparations under this administration, as you said, we can't see that happening because they are not friend. This party is not friend of black people, regardless of how many times they try to tell you that it's the Democratic Party that's racist. Look at the policies. Look at the things they're trying to do. Erasing Black history. As she was saying, what did they do with that little one piece in the museums? They're erasing our history. Not the Democrats, the Republicans. Trying to roll back civil rights. What did they do? I haven't seen the Democrats do anything like that. Don't pay attention because people tell you that Republicans freed the slaves. Yeah, but we never got our 40 acres and a mule.
And the reality is the Republicans didn't free the slaves. The slaves freed
Right.
themselves. Let's be very clear.
True.
There
True
was
that.
there was so many of them defecting to the other side. They were terrified of the insurrections that were happening. They were freeing themselves. It got to a point where they said, "We're not going to win this thing." That's essentially what it came down to. So this whole notion of, "Oh my gosh, we just decided to free you all and let you go." That is ahistorical as well. But in our
Mm-hmm.
closing, I want us to be in this Black History Month. We've seen people deliberately try to disparage us this month. We've seen people say derogatory things. We've seen people being especially disrespectful this month and this year. And I want to just tell Black people to just know and understand that when you start seeing these things rear its ugly head, it's because people realize that the curtain is closing on the world that they've known. You're only seeing a
Mm-hmm.
spike in this anger, in this vitriol, because these people know that they're in a losing fight. The world is changing. The world is becoming more and more melanated, and their place in the world will continue to be they'll continue to go into the sunset. And It's not because people want them to go into the sunset, but literally their own actions are pushing them in the direction of extinction.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, and when people are so hell bent on going into extinction, you cannot stop it. You can't stop it because they think they're going in the right direction, and they don't want to look at the signs telling them you're headed in the wrong direction. And so all you can do is continue to live your life, to continue to live in a way that's positive, that's uplifting, that is life giving and life flowing and growth and change. That's your job in this moment. Your job in this moment is not to keep waving people down and saying you're headed in the wrong direction because they're not trying to even look. I think about that video a couple weeks back where the man was driving by this black woman. They were in a neighborhood, and you probably saw it. He was
I saw
driving.
that.
He was driving this. He was speeding down the street. He saw a black woman, and he decided to look at her and flip her off. He took his eyes off of the road, and because he was so bent on disrespecting the black woman by flipping her off, he crashed into another parked car. That's literally what we're seeing. People who are so bent on trying to do harm to us as black people, as melanated people around the world, that they are crashing out when all they had to do was focus on their own journey,
Mm-hmm.
focus in on what's going on in their own vehicle, focus in on the road ahead of them. But he couldn't do that. He just had to turn and flip her off and wound up in a whole car accident himself. And
Lost
her
the front wheel.
and her in her wonderful melanated self still said, "Are you okay?" Because that's how we are. We're not aiming for someone's destruction, but sometimes destruction comes when you're aiming to harm us. But guess what? We're still there as the human beings that we are to ask the question, "Are you okay?" I know you're
Mm-hmm.
headed to self destruction, but are you okay? We're still going to ask the question. And ladies and gentlemen, this is our time. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shante Charles. I want to thank our co-host, Pastor Ben, for coming in and sharing and talking and sharing insight with us. Always glad to have you on when you can make it. Um, Remember, everyone, light is the most daring opposition to evil. So go out and be what?
Light.
Light. Take care, everyone. Be well, and most importantly,